Hello and welcome to At the Desk, your home for politics, history, and crime. I'm your host, Sean Romeo, and tonight our panelists will discuss the looming trials of former President Donald Trump and their potential impact on the upcoming 2024 presidential election. We will also discuss ongoing political, economic, and water issues in the city of Flint, Michigan. Our history panel will then wrap up Women's History Month with a discussion about America's first ladies and other historically significant women and how they compare to some of their fictional counterparts. And lastly, in another edition of ATD International, our own EA1 will take us to Brazil, where charges are also pending against former President Jair Bolsonaro. Now, pull up a chair with us here at the desk. Welcome back. After former President Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, he was implicated in criminal activity. At the end of his term, he took classified documents with him to Mar-a-Lago, which was searched by the FBI in August of 2022, and he now faces charges for his handling of the documents. He has also been charged for attempting to overturn the 2020 election and events surrounding the riot at the Capitol building on January 6, 2021. In addition, he also faces charges in New York and Georgia for election interference and hush money payments to an adult film star. In all, he faces 88 felony counts in 4 separate cases. Here with all the details is our politics panel, hosted by the always fascinating Jordan Spagnoli.
Thanks, Sean. With the 2024 elections quickly approaching, we look to the Republican candidate and former president's criminal charges. We're going to look at what Donald Trump has been charged with, the constitutionality of him pardoning himself if elected, and the effects this could have on the former president and his 2024 presidential campaign. So in total, he faces 4 criminal indictments in 4 different cities, 88 total criminal charges. I think we should really dive into what are those charges, what is he facing?
So I'm going to start with what I think is the most important one, Georgia. So he is being charged under the anti-racketeering charges, which is colloquially known as RICO charges. I just want to take a moment and point out the fact that in our 2024, our year of 2024, a former president has these same criminal charges as a well-known rapper. Crazy times we're living in. I never thought I would see the day, but then again, I'm only 20, so
America, right?
America, beautiful, land of the free, home of the brave. But basically, there are 13. He has 13 actual charges pending in Georgia. He's not only being charged by himself, but there are 18 other people being charged in Georgia, along with his best friend, Rudy Giuliani. And basically, we have his involvement with January 6th, whether or not he was involved in racketeering and inciting the riots that happened. I think that's a really important one. And I think it's going to be a defining moment or defining case in his presidential aspirations.
So there's a lot to unpack here, and there's a lot that Donald Trump is getting away with that is a big problem here. And he's getting away with the fact that he can pin this on Joe Biden. He's calling them Biden indictments. And obviously, he deserves a fair trial, but he's pulling people not involved in the situation into the trial. So that's where I see a faulty. However, to defend him, I just said something that almost like hurt him. Now I can say something that defended him, is that there is such thing as the First Amendment. And the First Amendment is probably the excuse he's going to be using in a lot of these January 6th charges. So it can go both ways. It's a messy case. And honestly, the way the voters are looking at it is that at the end of the day, they're seeing all these charges stack up in different places, all now, although they all didn't take place at the same time. And they're all looking and they're all going, is this politically motivated? And that's Donald Trump's scapegoat to the whole situation with voters. And that is why I, along with many other people, believe that he is rising in the polls because of it. That's not what many people expected when the charges were first brought to him. And with that being said, my tie is actually a Donald J. Trump tie, gold-plated. And I don't know if you guys can zoom in on it. If not, it's okay. But it's gold-plated, just like Trump Force One, his plane. It's a signature collection. I thought it was appropriate to wear it today. Anyway,
appropriate.
It's a
anyway,
very nice
Yes.
tie.
I rest my case. Go
Love
ahead.
the tie.
Yes.
So yeah, Ryan, I love what you said there. So like, it's very interesting because Trump always has this controversial brand of like, I'm the victim. I'm kind of like the guy that's, being targeted by the elites. I'm being targeted by all the people that are already in power. And so because of that, he's still leading in the polls over Biden and RFK, who we'll talk about later. Yeah. He's leading by about 4 points right now in all the polls, all the most trusted polls.
Right.
And he was leading in the majority of the swing states. And it's very interesting, even given the fact that he has all these charges facing him right now.
And not to mention, too, is that super PACs are also helping him with his bills as well. That's another thing. So a lot of the fact that he's running for president and the fact that he can use, the Biden scapegoat, as I was saying, although it's really unfair, it is really helping him so far at the moment. And not only that, but with Ronna McDaniel stepping down and taking that new job that she's not going to actually have with NBC News, that leaves two individuals who are very Trump-heavy people, including one of his daughters, to run the RNC. So a lot of it is falling into position for him to be able to almost escape some of these charges, but not Georgia.
And
But not Georgia, that's
I
right.
like what you said about scapegoats, because I think another thing that we need to touch on when talking about scapegoats and the things that Trump is saying is the whole situation with the DA, Fannie Willis, and her lover, boyfriend, whatever their
It's like a
relationship
O.J. Simpson
was.
case all over again.
Something.
Marsha Clark and Chris Darden.
Something like that. And that whole situation, and he's using that, or his lawyers at least are using that as a rebuttal, saying that this case is obviously rigged because you have the DA appointing somebody that she was in a romantic relationship with to oversee the case. He did end up stepping down, and that allowed Fannie Willis to continue being on the case. But that seriously could help him, and I think, Ryan, you're completely right that he has these tools at his disposal that he can flip the whole situation around. And we already know he has a very strong fan base, supporter base. Let me amend my language. But
Well, he did say he was like a rapper with his, his crime love. So fan base might be a
it's the
fitting
same
word.
thing. Him and Young Thug might be in the same boat. But yeah, I think he has a very good set of lawyers that can help him, at the very least, divert attention away from what the actual charges are talking about and put it more on that political angle, that this is just to stop him from running for
This
president.
is to smear him and his campaign. And I think you guys are right. Georgia is definitely going to be one of those kind of sticking points for him. I think that's where maybe he's going to see a lot of concern, like we were saying, with the anti-racketeering and just, trying to get Georgia's Secretary of State to find him the votes to win that battle state. I don't really know how you come back from that. I don't know how you defend that, but I'm sure they will find a way. But I think that's going to be one of the really important court cases and trials that, that's going to probably have an effect over this election year. But also, if these trials happen before November and before elections, because I think that's a big part too, is he's just trying to keep pushing these off, pushing them off until after November.
It's all about time. These cases were all brought together at the same time.
Yeah.
That raises the Biden question of him being involved again. That obviously is a myth. But, that raises that question. And then the timing of all of this being pushed after the election keeps his focus on campaigning and holding that lead over Biden in time.
But so then another case that I would say I think this was the first one to kind of start this chain of indictments, Mar-a-Lago, mishandling of secret documents in his home in Florida, and kind of everything to go with that. That had 40 felony charges last I checked.
And I feel like it's kind of been pushed out of the public eye. I don't know if I'm the only one that's felt like this, but I feel like
I agree.
At least
January
you
6th
haven't been
has been the
speaking about it.
It's the same thing with Jeffrey Epstein, because yes, Donald Trump hung out with Jeffrey Epstein back in the day, but same thing as Bill Clinton with these documents. Other people have as well. Mike Pence, we've seen some notable Democrats.
Joe Biden has
Joe Biden
documents as well.
So at the same time, it's almost hypocritical from a political standpoint to hone in on that. I feel like.
Yeah, but I definitely agree, though. I think the whole, the January 6th charges, the, Fulton County, I think those have got more, the Stormy Daniels case, I think those things have got more
notoriety.
more notoriety in the news and, in the media in general than, what happened with Mar-a-Lago, just because of, I think it causes more, better headlines. I just feel like it's more interesting to the public.
Once other indictments started coming forward, this one seemed to kind of take a step to the back burner. But I mean, this one, if he is found guilty on the charges, could carry a penalty of up to 20 years in prison. Like, this one could have a big effect on him if he is found guilty, which obviously he's pled not guilty, and there is still no trial date set for these. But
it would set a very heavy standard in terms of what a president and vice president can bring home to their house at night.
Right.
I'm just going to say
but
that.
then if Trump is convicted under these charges, then does that mean we're going to have to bring Biden to trial? Is
Right.
Mike
That's
Pence
exactly-
also
Mike
going to have
Pence,
to be
yeah, exactly.
brought to trial? So this is going to set a precedent. Based on the ruling in Florida, this is going to set a precedent for, like Ryan said, what people can bring, how harshly these things are monitored, maybe change the whole way that the White House handles passing documents to presidents. I mean, is it going to be the case now that if Trump is indicted, presidents aren't going to be able to have these documents in their hands for more than a couple hours? They're not going to be able to bring them home with them, pore over them while they're in bed.
Well, and I think the thing you have to think about is it's like, in what circumstances are we talking? Are they, like you said, are they able to take them home? Because sure, they want to go home. They want to go home for the night. Can they spend time in their home?
Because president is not a 9 to 5.
Right. It's not a 9 to 5 job. You're
job.
always on the clock. So should they be able to take these documents back to their home to go through them? Sure. But also, is it concern that was he leaving them out in a place where other people could see them? I know one of the things he had was a Pentagon plan of attack and classified map, like stuff like that. Is it cautiously?
It's a national security issue.
Yeah.
That's what we're coming around here. It is a national security issue. What does he have? Who is he sharing it with? Where is it going?
That's the circumstance.
Why are DC documents for the federal government in Florida? Like what are they doing in Florida in his house when he's not serving as the president of the United States is the question. What is the significance of it? All that is really in question right now. And it's been sidelined.
And I think that's the important part, like you said. Why are they in Florida when he's not president?
Right, and even there were talks of him bringing people into the room with the documents and showing, hey, these are the documents that I've had when I was president, having people look over them. I mean, that's
the problem.
That's hugely dangerous.
It can be very troublesome to have, whatever random people seeing those documents, especially given the fact that Trump had that relationship with Putin. I think a lot of people, because of things like that, don't trust him in particular with those documents, to have them in his home, to have them out of the White House, out of national security,
and I think,
because of things like that.
Well, and I think that's what it's going to lead to is the circumstances surrounding how were these documents shared, where were they shown? Because if a president's just taking them home to review them for the night before going back to the job right in the morning, that's one thing. But like you guys were saying, are they out? Is it seen? Is he showing off, look what I have when I was president? I'm not anymore.
It's going to go case by case as well, because they found Trump's documents at Mar-a-Lago. But also at the same time, they found Biden's documents in his Delaware garage. So, everything is up in the air with who they're going to charge and for what, and what the meaning of each document actually is.
Right.
So then another indictment, another case we can look into here. New York, he's facing charges stemming from hush money payments made during the 2016 presidential campaign to bury allegations of sexual encounters with Stormy Daniels.
April 15th.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting about this one
is
what's interesting about this one is that this has been a known situation, and that the charges are coming about now. That's the interesting part of this whole thing.
And that's why people think it's so political, because of the way that it's been timed.
Yeah.
I think that's the part that kind of keeps coming full circle here is, why are these all coming up at the same time? Why are these coming up years later? Kind of going off of what you guys have all been saying about, like, is this just, how can we stop him in his search for presidency?
And I feel like in terms of all the other charges that have been levied against him, the hush money payments, they don't have the same gravity, in my personal opinion, because it's just Trump doing something that's distasteful at best. It's not threatening national security like Mar-a-Lago. It's not questioning the very foundations of our democracy.
I think the word you're looking for, or the words you're looking for, or the phrase you're looking for is Donald Trump, private citizen.
There you go. Exactly. Donald Trump as a private citizen, and now it's being politicized. Obviously,
it's an extramarital affair. It's something that a lot of Americans would view as immoral, but it is nowhere near the level of a national security threat that with Mar-a-Lago.
But then that brings in the idea of what we want our president to be, and what type of person we want our president to be. Because if America prides itself on being a country built upon good morals and having our leaders be moral people, then I can understand why this can cause such an outrage.
And I think
our history panel has to be so excited right now, because they can look back and they can look at the Clinton situation. Because at the end of the day, we are talking about something. This is a conversation that we were having with Bill Clinton in the 90s and his affair with Monica Lewinsky. And things just keep repeating and repeating and repeating. And at the end of the day, funny enough, it all comes down to the Supreme Court. It does, because the Supreme Court sets precedent in law. At the end of the day, they can turn down anything at the end of the day, and they can change anything, like we've been seeing with things like Roe v. Wade. So at the end of the day, the Supreme Court makes these decisions.
Right.
But see, they're kind of not going at it from this affair type of situation. It's the 34 counts, felony charges, or counts, falsifying business records. So they're hitting him on a technicality. You paid off your lawyer who paid off the porn star, and you falsified the records saying it was just for some legal things that there was never a record of. That's where they're getting him on this one. So yeah, this is gonna, damage his character, but it was really, the court and the trial cases aren't about the affair. It's about what happened after the affair. The paying
Legal affairs.
Yeah, the legal
affairs.
falsifying those records, hush money being paid, the way they went about doing it, the secretiveness of it. And that's where it's coming back to bite them.
I was talking about how history repeats itself, but right now we are in new waters. As I was saying earlier, we are still in new waters at the end of the day. The timing of everything is just so, I guess the right word is interesting. It's all bunching together at the same time towards an election. This is a very important election for our country. I know everybody says this is the most important election every 4 years, but this really could be the most important
This one is
election.
extra important in my opinion, given the circumstances of what's going on and with the ages of both
Big
candidates.
picture.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
unprecedented. I think it's probably, if not the most important, the most unique election that in American history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like you said, it's new waters. It's history not repeating itself, but creating a new path. And to be witnessing it in real time is so insane to me.
It's the new Jefferson-Adams rivalry we're seeing between Biden and Trump.
Oh my God, that's a perfect way to put it.
That is a
Great
great
way to put it, actually.
I have to sit down with the history panel and apologize for 20 minutes because all I've been doing has been citing history.
But so kind of then moving into I would consider to be the most notable of all the indictments Trump is facing is attempt to overthrow the election. January 6th, the riot on the Capitol. Now this is something I think
This is the
lives
one
in
getting
everyone's
media
minds.
attention.
This is what everyone remembers. This is what everyone's going after. He tried to stop the turn of an election. He tried to say he won when he didn't. And that's kind of what everyone's focus is on, and that's what most of the public knows about.
Of course, and it's because everybody remembers January 6th. Everybody remembers everything that went down in that time period. Him trying to overturn the election in certain states, swing states, claiming that it was a rigged election, that Biden cheated, all this and that, and of course the riot that occurred at the Capitol building. And yeah, that got so much media attention at the time, and still does to this day, and people still talk about it all the time. And yeah, everyone just remembers that, and that's why the media is covering it so much, and that's why it's being the one hammered most out of the 4 cases.
Because that definitely is a big part of our history. This is something that you're going to look back on in 40 years from now. Oh, yeah, I remember where I was when the Capitol was stormed.
Yeah, your children are going to come back from school and say, oh, today we learned about January 6th, and you're going to be transported. I mean,
There was a guy in the Viking helmet, running into the Capitol
Yeah.
building.
like Jackson said, it's been hammered so much that I even feel like it was like a couple months ago. I mean, this was 3 years ago, and I still feel like we're still like in the middle of it.
I'm going to say this, as long as Donald Trump is around, January 6th is around.
Yeah.
For sure. And to the point where it actually influenced international politics. I'm going to speak about this a little later in my package, so audience, make sure to tune in. But Brazil, too, they took inspiration from January 6th, and it's a defining moment in not just American history, but international history, because it's the first time where we've seen in the developed world democracy challenged so brazenly.
So kind of, like you said, this is a big pivotal moment of our history, and the charges he's facing is conspiracy to defraud the United States government and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Now, this was set to go to trial March 4th, but that has been pushed back. There is no trial date for this one yet. So again, will it happen before November? Who knows?
Again, it's always a matter of time with these things.
Always a matter of time, and obviously whatever is decided to happen will happen when it happens. But so then that kind of moves us into what is the potential outcome of all of these charges if he's found guilty, if he's not found guilty, the constitutionality of what everyone's been talking about. Can he pardon himself if back in office? I think there's a lot there that we could kind of dig a little deeper into as well.
Of course. So I will go. So there's nothing in the Constitution that explicitly stops the president from pardoning himself. There's nothing in there that explicitly does that. But a lot of people do believe that, the word grant or the word, pardon historically has an implication of two parties involved.
Right.
And so a person doing it to himself is something should not be legal. So my personal take is that we should go with what the Constitution says, and that he should be allowed to do what the Constitution says, which is that he could do it hypothetically, but it's never been done before, and that's the the weird thing here.
Yeah, I
know
think
Ryan was saying something about the fact that these are
All right, you're
state
all
charges.
calling on me. You're all calling-
so
all right.
I'm looking
All
at
right.
Ryan. I'm
where
like,
you were
no,
going.
you can say
all right.
yes.
State charges, thanks to the 10th Amendment, since 1791, are not the responsibility or jurisdiction of the federal government. And in this case scenario, a Brian Kemp, Georgia, he makes the decisions. So in Georgia, him or the sitting governor at the time of a potential prosecution, if he's found guilty, would be making the decision. It wouldn't be the President of the United States. Now, If he's in jail in Georgia and he isn't pardoned, but let's say he wins, he's president of the United States, he takes care of all his federal charges, all the other charges from New York are wiped away, but Georgia, where he very much could be prosecuted. He's prosecuted and he's in jail, but he's elected president of the United States. Now that raises the question of what Congress and his cabinet are going to do. Are they going to invoke the 25th Amendment? Stuff like that.
Well, 'cause
so
see, that's...
it gets very touchy, and that's why I keep saying the Supreme Court, let me say it a third time, the Supreme Court, they're going to make decisions at the end of the day that are going to change the course of history, like they've been doing. They've been doing it forever, they're going to keep doing it. And I think inaction by the Supreme Court is going to be interesting as well, because that's going to leave it up to Georgia. And Georgia, it's a Brian Kemp state. However, Atlanta is very Democratic. So the whole thing is very touchy. It's very political. Although it is law and order, it is very political at the end of the day. Politics is a key determination, and the Supreme Court has so much control over federal politics. And the Supreme Court is really the only body that has control over state politics at the end of the day, because they can twist and turn their previous laws and reinterpret the Constitution as they please. So they're a very powerful body. Right now they're Republican, but also at the same time they have to look at themselves. They have to look at what the consequences could be of making decisions like that. So at the end of the day, it looks like it's going to end up being Georgia that's going to be the decider in what's going to happen if he's elected president.
Certainly does.
That's my prediction. My grand prediction is that if he gets elected president of the United States, I think New York, first of all, is going to be wiped. That's just my personal opinion. I think Georgia, and obviously he can pardon himself from any federal counts. But Georgia is really where everything gets messy with him trying to overturn the election. And I think this Supreme Court is going to try and find a way to get involved, maybe in Trump's favor because they're Republican, or maybe not because they realize that there's not much they really can do that won't taint their record as members of the Supreme Court. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be up to Georgia's government.
Well, see, and I think that's where it gets interesting is, none of us know. We don't know. We're in unprecedented times, and I did like what you said about the 25th Amendment, because that's something that I've been seeing circulating too, of is he going to invoke the 25th Amendment, take a step back, vice president pardons him, and then he's back in power. There's so many potential outcomes here that none of us can really speak on because we're in unprecedented territory.
We can only watch, really.
We can only watch.
And
watch and
states,
see.
Vivek Ramaswamy loves to talk about it. States' rights, he's a states' rights guy. And at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting to see what Georgia's going to look like if he gets prosecuted in terms of who's governor, because that governor has the power.
No, and I think that's definitely a very interesting point, and it's to be determined. But so it seems even with all the criminal charges, the former president is still polling higher than our other candidates. However, it's still early, and November is still many months away. So to be determined.
Thanks, Jordan. As always, anyone who has been charged is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Stay tuned for our crime panel as they will discuss the Flint water crisis. We'll be back in a moment with you at the desk. In 2014, the city of Flint, Michigan switched its drinking water supply in a cost-saving move. Unfortunately, the effects of doing so kicked off a major crisis that killed at least a dozen people and sickened many more with Legionnaire's disease and exploded lead levels in water, which would sicken children for years to come. Additionally, the city is experiencing rising crime, and the city police and fire departments are underfunded and underpaid. Our crime tale tonight will go into all the details and any attempts to prosecute those responsible. Now I hand it off to our panel, hosted by the always enlightening Savannah Barr. Savannah.
Thanks, Sean. I'm joined tonight by Ryan Lowy, Eva Hines, and Sam Raschio. Tonight, we'll be diving into the events of Flint, Michigan, where a seemingly simple decision to switch the city's water supply in 2014 unraveled into one of the most shocking environmental disasters in recent memory. As lead seeped into the water, an entire community unknowingly faced a silent killer, plagued by mysterious illnesses and developmental delays. Despite mounting evidence of danger, authorities turned a blind eye, leaving residents to suffer the devastating consequences. But amidst the tragedy emerged a story of resilience, as whistleblowers, journalists, and activists fought tirelessly for justice, demanding accountability for the greed and incompetence that shattered countless lives. The scars of Flint's water crisis serve as a haunting reminder of the human cost of bureaucratic failure. Now, Eva, do you want to tell us a little bit about how the town found out about this issue and what was contaminating them?
Yeah, I want to talk kind of about a key player in this scandal. So it was Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, and she was a pediatrician who played, I feel, a very crucial role in kind of getting this investigation underway. So she began noticing that her young patients in Flint were showing twice the normal amount of lead in their blood. You know, people come in for their annual checkup, and, you know, they always, for younger children, check their blood. And she kind of saw twice the amount that a normal child is supposed to have. So because of this, she kind of started an investigation where she analyzed blood lead level data from children in the area after the water switch, and she saw a huge increase in the lead in the blood after this huge water switch. So this led to her in 2015. She held a press conference kind of warning the town, especially younger children, not to drink this water, not to drink. It's not good for you. It's kind of dangerous. Now, this wasn't the big thing that blew this case open, but her work in this kind of led to more investigations, and her persistent kind of talk about this case kind of led to more awareness about what was going on in the town.
What I think is really interesting about that is she did bring that awareness to this issue, but also before that, the town was bringing awareness to this issue. You know, they brought in large jugs of this disgusting brown water to the police and everyone in the town, and they still didn't do anything about that. So her investigations with that, it didn't really go anywhere until this case blew up in the end.
The whole thing was an absolute mess when it came to the water. It was all a cost-saving move, and that flies back into municipal government. Although the state did have some authority over the situation, they did send some help in, which unfortunately requested the water. At the end of the day, what was really happening in Flint was in 2011, they had a total disaster. It was very cold in Flint that year to begin with. At the end of the day, Flint's population dropped from 200,000 to under 100,000 people, and that was because car companies that used to produce in Flint, they left. They hit the road, and that left less jobs, and that all of a sudden just created a spiral down to less tax money. Law enforcement was laid off. And at the end of the day, I want to do an analogy. There's around 3 patrols on duty here on campus with university police. That's for around 12,000 students, I'd say, per se, living on campus right now, would you say, roughly? Around 3 officers per 12,000. Well, there was 9 officers on duty for 99,000 people. That's how much money they didn't have. They had to lay off half of the force after what happened in 2011. They had to rebuild. A new mayor came in after the old one was exposed for, being involved in the water crisis. And at the end of the day, the new mayor came in, appointed a new police chief. They brought the CAT squad in, and the department just changed. It had a lot of issues. Everyone was overworked. And, just because of this water crisis and people not wanting to be in Flint anymore, less work opportunities, the whole city just essentially fell apart.
That's something I was wondering when I was reading about this case was, why are people still living there? And I mean,
people couldn't leave. People didn't have the money to leave, and there was a whole millage that people voted on. Should we lower taxes but lay off even more law enforcement and fire department, officers? At the end of the day, they needed those people, and the millage passed. But if the millage didn't pass, who knows how many officers would have been on duty for 99,000 people in a city where crime is skyrocketing. And what was funny, too, was that place, Flint, was a location for a Democratic primary debate in 2016. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton had a debate right there in Flint, Michigan, in their biggest arena. And that brought a lot of attention, too, into the city of Flint. How Donald Trump, who was, essentially going to be the Republican candidate at that point, they were starting to figure out that he was, pulling away in the primaries. They were saying, why is Donald Trump not campaigning here? He came there and started talking about his own issues in Flint. So Flint really just took the national stage as a city falling apart. It was baby Detroit.
Yeah.
And kind of going off of what you said about why didn't people leave? Yeah, the power. And I mean, I think we saw this a lot. It was kind of targeted on people who were poor, who had less, some minority kind of towns. They really couldn't do anything about it. They didn't really have the power or funds or means to do anything.
I think that brings it to now today. Even now, people want the federal or the government in Michigan to replace damaged service lines, reimburse water bills since then, and just fund health, because people are still suffering from the effects that they had with the lead in the water.
They fixed the supply. They're getting water from Detroit once again. However, it was too late. And the state apologized, the sitting governor apologized, but at the end of the day, it became a political issue because obviously it was a Republican governor who was there, so Hillary Clinton was all up in arms about it. And the whole thing just became a national situation. And not only was it a national situation at the time, but still today, people personally are being affected by what happened. Again, shortage in law enforcement, but they said over 6% of children were affected by high lead levels. That's going to affect them for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I feel like the saddest part of this case is the long-term effects. I mean, as we know, it killed 12 children, if not more, and there was just so much illness. And these people are going to have to live with those illnesses and those long-term effects for the rest of their life. Hearing loss, different issues with their body is not working well. There's just so many long-term effects of this huge thing. And I think from maybe like an outside point of view, you might look at it and be like, oh, just the water. This wasn't a big crime when we've looked at murder and, you know, crazy things like that. But at the end of the day, this affected so many families and so many lives. And I feel like that's really important to look at. I feel like that's the worst part of this whole case.
Well, I think it was a system failure on the government's part. It's crazy because this could have been so easily prevented. And, you know, at first it was a silent killer. People had no idea what was happening. They're like, why are we getting sick? Like, why are we, like, all dying? And then when it came out, when the truth came to light, there were so many protests and articles about it, and nothing was still done.
I think one of the main things and the main issues with that is there's now a distrust in their government. And I think you can see this with a lot of different places, but especially in Flint, Michigan, people still to this day don't trust their government because they said, if they're hiding this water, what else are they hiding? And people are still drinking out of bottled water today because they don't trust that what the numbers that the government are telling them is true.
Well, yeah, as you said, they recourse. They have a different governor now. Not only that, the city has a different mayor. There was a whole documentary about the whole thing on Netflix. It was a very good one. It was about 7 or 8 episodes. But, you know, it really just showed what life looked like in Flint. Absolute disaster. Distrust in government, distrust in police. You know, the whole city was basically up in flames. It's Michigan. People are freezing. They can't afford heat. The whole thing was just an absolute mess. And at the end of the day, it is government's fault. The state of Michigan sent advisees to try and rebuild the city after the 2011 crisis. And they just did a terrible job. The whole thing was just an absolute mess. They tried to save money. Instead, all they did was poison their taxpayers, so the money wasn't coming back. The whole thing was an absolute mess.
Yeah, you just feel so powerless. I mean, if you can't trust your government or your officials, like, who can you trust? I mean, there's, at the end of the day, nothing you can really do. And I know we talked about this a little bit, Ryan, but, like, now even the city has such a big crime rate, and stuff still isn't going well there. I mean, the crime...
It doesn't help that it's a suburb of Detroit.
Right.
It does not help.
Exactly. I mean, that town's just kind of in shambles.
Well, because it kind of shows people that they can get away with really anything they want because there's such little law enforcement presence in the town. I mean, this whole big issue, people didn't do anything about it. So a little crime here and there, will they do anything about that
The
too?
Cat Squad. Let's talk about the Cat Squad. The cats. Do you guys know about the Cat Squad? Very interesting. So obviously the new mayor appointed a new police chief, and that new police chief created the Cat Squad. It was a very intense militaristic type of police force. They had humongous military-like cars, and they would drive around. If they see so much as somebody, I'm trying to think of the proper word, urinating, instead of, you know, using another word for it, urinating on public property, oh, you are in big trouble with the Cat Squad. The Cat Squad would attack you. They would arrest just about anybody who's committing a crime. They would enforce a maximum sentence. They would send that to the DA's office. It was a very intense squad, and at the end of the day, although it was rough on the people, it made the numbers better.
It's like they're overcompensating. They're like, well, now we have to lock down even harder.
The DA's office, they went, the Cat Squad, wow. The Cat Squad would come in, you know, someone would be handcuffed walking in just because, as I said, they urinated on school property. Somebody walking in with handcuffs, charges pressed on them. This was an intense thing. And they asked the police chief about it, and he said, you know, I didn't want to do it, but I have to do it. I have to save this city. Nobody's going to move to my beautiful city if it's not beautiful anymore. If people are burning it up, if the fire department's overworked because of arson, you know, if there's been shootings and it's taking us 3-4 hours to respond, the Cat Squad has to drive around. They have to deter crime. They have to look bigger than they are. They have to act like a military. They have to make this place look better than it is on paper.
See, that's interesting to me because if I was looking at places to move and I saw a town had that, I would not want to move there.
The Cat Squad?
Right.
Yeah, the Cat Squad. Having a militaristic police system, that would deter me from living there. I think the effects like to date and like currently are good, but in the future, I think they could have negative effects having that such a militaristic police force in a town.
Well, they're almost at the same time not thinking about that because they're just so desperate. Crime has been a disaster. No businesses are going to want to start up. Like Campbell's Soup doesn't want to go back to Camden. Camden's in shambles. So that was almost the thought that they had.
You know, and I think it's just their version of trying to take back control and trying to regain trust in people. But like you said, I think it is a deterrent, and there's like a healthy medium you have to have. Initially, after that happens, there's only so much that they can do to regain the people's trust. But then fading out after that, I feel like they need to like lessen their grip.
This Cat Squad. Yeah, this Cat Squad. They were told by their police chief, act like you're in the military and it's the enemy. It's absolutely insane that this is law enforcement, but they had to do what they had to do to rebuild the city, and it was working for a temporary amount of time, and that police department did get a lot of backfire for it, but at the end of the day, he said, look, on paper, we are one of the most dangerous cities in America, if not the most dangerous city in America. Now, we're starting to scale back a little bit and look a little bit better, but people were saying it took 3 to 4 hours for law enforcement to respond to an emergency at my house, and these were for, like, real emergencies. Like, in my town where I grew up, if there was a shooting, there would be 6 or 7 7 different neighboring law enforcement departments,
Oh.
helping my town police department, everybody on and off duty, taking care of the situation. Flint, Michigan, takes an hour or two for a cop or two to show up. So it was a mess.
But then again, why were they the most dangerous city? Because of government failure.
Yeah, and 2011 really, just started the whole problem.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. This crisis serves as a reminder of the importance of safety and health in our communities. Back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Savannah. The lasting crisis in Flint is still felt to this day as the city continues to struggle with water issues and the government operating with a funding problem. On a lighter note, our history panel is next with a capper to Women's History Month, discussing America's first ladies and other historical female figures. Stay tuned. To wrap up Women's History Month, we are featuring a segment about America's first ladies and other major female historical figures, how they relate to some of our favorite fictional characters. For all those details, I will hand it off to our panel host, the ever-knowledgeable Yaya One. Yaya.
Thanks, Sean. Women's History Month is coming to a close, and we at the Her Story panel wanted to show some love to some of our first ladies, along with other women who have created lasting legacies. As you can see, the two women on the panel are sitting on the right side because women have historically been on the right side of history. And what better way to show love to women than by comparing them to fictional characters? Okay, guys, so how this is going to go is basically everybody has chosen a first lady and two other female historical figures, and we're going to be comparing them to some of our favorite fictional characters. I'm going to go ahead and start with the ever-lovely Michelle Obama. I mean, can you say first lady?
First lady.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love that. She has captured the hearts of America, and I have compared her to Aunt Viv, the original one, of course, the better one, of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. First of all, their personalities, they're just so warm and loving, and I've never met Michelle Obama. I've never met Aunt Viv, but I could tell that, if I did ever have the great luck to meet them, they would just treat me like their own, like I'm their niece or something, and they're both no nonsense. They're both also very driven. We see Aunt Viv, she had a passion for art, for dance, for music. Michelle Obama had a full-fledged career. She graduated from Harvard, and they both kind of had to step back, and not to make this about men, but they had to step back to support the men that they loved and to build their careers while still also holding on to their individuality. And when you think of a first lady, you think either Eleanor Roosevelt, or for me, you think of either Eleanor Roosevelt or you think of Michelle Obama. I mean, she has made such a mark on the presidency that she was even thrown out as a potential candidate to replace Biden if he didn't get the Democratic nomination. So I think she's amazing. I think Aunt Viv's amazing. So that's my first round. That's my first lady.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
good
totally.
choice.
And when you think of these two women, you do think of them supporting their husbands, but it is their the power that they have that just only accentuates what's going on inside. Barack wouldn't be as popular today because he has such a beautiful family, period, end of sentence, and that would not exist without Michelle. Totally.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Who do you think is a better hugger? I always thought Michelle Obama would give a really good
I
hug.
think
Michelle.
for
Yeah,
sure.
totally.
Might take that one.
If she
Well-
sees this, Michelle, we want to hug.
I think I would take Aunt Viv just because of her role in Fresh Prince. But for my pick, I actually am talking about, I'm not starting off with the first lady, by the way. I'm starting off with somebody else. A woman named Eva Kor. Now, do any of the three of you know who Eva Kor is?
Not once in my life.
Okay,
you.
well, let me tell you that Eva Kor is the coolest woman to ever live in history. Cliff Notes version. Eva Kor was split from her twin sister and her mother at the beginning of the Holocaust by a doctor who was doing experiments on twins. And then Eva Kor was getting experimented on, and horrible things were happening. It was terrible, and she was about to die. Now, when they were about to die, they'd be sent to kind of like this hospital that was basically a prison where they'd be left to die. Eva Kor said, screw that, I'm not dying, kept herself alive for 4 days, got sent back, World War II ends, she gets freed, she lives to be 85, serves 10 years in the Israeli army, has 3 healthy kids, and starts a foundation that has raised $5 billion for the Holocaust.
Capital B.
Remembrance.
We're talking about capital B.
Capital
billion.
B. Capital B billion.
Wow.
And I compared Eva Kor to the lovely Katara.
Love her. Love her.
Look at me right here.
Great fictional character.
Avatar: The Last Airbender is the greatest cartoon ever made. I just need to make sure that that's known. Katara also went through a genocide from the Fire Nation. She also was split up from her family. She also was split up from her brother for points. And she also fought to become a symbol for the future for a better world. And they are both incredibly amazing, wonderful, bad but, not a bad word, people who
are just amazing. I mean, come on.
That
That's like
is-
the coolest story ever, is it not?
And I've never heard that up until this day.
I hadn't
but the
either.
comparison there it's stark. It's very
Right.
clear.
Exactly. That's what I'm
I
saying.
think this was a beautiful comparison. I love how that you have them both wearing blue too. I don't know if that was on purpose, but it looks good.
Yeah.
And I think definitely like it speaks to the power of just like having that hope that like whatever situation you're in, you're gonna see it through. And I
Yeah,
think
resilience.
That's the resilience, exactly.
Perseverance, because Qatar is all about hope in that show, and that is exactly what Eva Core meant to the world.
All right. And so for my first lady, I decided to choose the lovely Nancy Reagan, and I am comparing her to Angela from The Office. Now, both of these women are a little bit tightly wound, certainly, but they are very resolute in their convictions and their beliefs. Though granted, both of them would probably make you feel bad about your poor life choices, that being probably that you smoked pot once. And she definitely would judge you for that. Though granted, again, both great managers. So like Nancy Reagan and Angela are like known for like taking control in the office, or I guess like in the White House, because Nancy Reagan's like press conferences talking about like don't do drugs, and of course Angela being like the person who's like the party coordinator in the show. Again, like trying to make the party as boring as possible.
Yeah,
Right?
straightforward and boring.
So.
Yeah. That's
you
a
know,
great comparison.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I actually had never thought about that, and I watched The Office like 80 times, and
Yeah.
that is a
The
fantastic
Office
comparison.
and the Oval Office. I love it.
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Full circle.
Absolutely.
That's why she's
Pun
our
intended.
host.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That was good.
Man, I've never seen The Office, but I
Me neither.
wish I could relate. I'm sure it
It's
sounds
perfect.
correct.
Like, that is perfect.
Okay, well,
That's
you know
it.
what? I'll take your word for it. And it's on my watch list. I'll get there eventually.
Yeah, you'll
Please do.
Someday.
Yes. For my first lady, though, I wanted to talk about Edith Wilson, who some people call her the first female president of the United States. Because when Woodrow Wilson, so basically he was the 28th president, and he had always had some previous health problems. He had a very severe stroke, and it left him he was severely debilitated. Oh my God,
Yes.
that's the right word. Thank you. Anyway, and so Edith was like, no, don't resign. Let's conceal this from the press and from your cabinet. No one has to know. And then she basically made political decisions. She served as the secretary, going back and forth between President Woodrow Wilson and Congress. And so I am comparing her to the lovely Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, because
yes.
you talked about
Wonderful.
last episode,
If Ruth
Catherine
Bader
Howard
Ginsburg,
standing on business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if Ruth Bader Ginsburg had seen Legally Blonde, which I
Oh.
really hope she had.
And yeah, wow, we're really just tying in all of these
Absolutely.
different things. But Edith Wilson and Elle Woods both completely stood on business. They both had a ton of responsibility towards the end of, Elle Woods' story. She took over the murder case that they were working on, and Edith Wilson took on the presidency. So, I think they were initially put in their positions because of a relationship to a man. So Edith Wilson was the first lady, obviously, and Elle Woods went to Harvard because she was in love with Warner, which, whatever, man. But she got in, and he got waitlisted initially. So
Well, they're given the chance to show their worth, and they do not give up on that opportunity.
absolutely,
They don't miss on that opportunity either.
no,
What,
they
like
stand
it's
on
hard?
business. Yeah,
No.
exactly.
I love that line. Iconic. One of my favorite lines ever said
Seriously.
in the movie. So it's back to me now. I'm going to be talking about the lovely Ida B. Wells. If you don't know who Ida B. Wells is, she was an African American journalist. She is most well known for her stories done on lynching and shedding light on the problem of lynching in the South, not only to the North, but internationally as well. I'm comparing her to our favorite cartoon journalist, Lois Lane. They both have the investigative chops. They want to go out and know what's going on in the world, exposing wrongdoing. Also, just this independence that they have. Ida B. Wells, she started her own newspaper. She did that stuff. She did everything by herself. She had a team with her at some point, but she started by herself. And she was just not willing to be boxed in by her slave heritage. And she saw a problem, and she was like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to let this be known, and something is going to be done about it. Just this willingness to expose wrongdoing, especially as women in journalism, it can be very hard. So for both of them to be such standout characters, or not an actual character in Ida B. Wells' case, but stand out in their fields, I think it's amazing. And it's very inspiring for me as an aspiring journalist as well. So I think I had to give homage to Ida B. Wells.
It's a very good comparison.
Super good.
She didn't bend the convictions of her time, and Lois Lane never been to being Superman's, girlfriend. So
Right. She
if
was
you
so much
can't,
more
if you're
than
not
that.
fully,
Exactly.
yeah, if you're not fully overshadowed by Superman, I mean, you're kind of a superhero in yourself.
Yeah,
So
right.
Yeah,
that's an
right. That's
absolutely
right.
good choice. So for my pick, I actually went with a woman named Wu Zhao, who actually ruled China from 690 to 705. So long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Not to do a little fiction reference there again. On the right there is a woman named Mizu from a cartoon called Blue Eyes Samurai.
good.
Blue Eyes Samurai is fantastic.
You need to watch that.
Wu Zhao, she did not care for her time. She basically became the emperor or empress or princess of China, one might say, at her time, and she just took over and dominated. She was ruthless. Now, she's a little bit controversial in history because she was ruthless, but I still think it's pretty cool that she just was like, yeah, we're going to stand on business, like you said. And she ruled for 15 years. She was the first woman emperor, and she took care of business. Mizu on the right there, she also stands on business all the time, every day. She's a woman in Japan in the 1500s who's also half white, so she was heavily discriminated against, and she's a natural-born killer. She doesn't care. She'll cut through anybody. So
Again,
both killers, both amazing.
wonderful, wonderful comparison. That show is absolutely, like, drop your jaw amazing. You should watch it.
Absolutely.
So, for my comparison, my second woman I decided was Jane Austen, and I wanted to compare her.
Love her.
Exactly. A wonderful, wonderful author, and I compare her to a character called Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones. And both of these women, at first glance, all you think of is the fact that they are like defined by the fact that they need to be married to somebody. Sansa Stark is getting married off to this evil guy Joffrey, and Jane Austen's father was trying to like set her up with multiple male suitors, and both of them were like, "Nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go do my own thing." And breaking this expectation set by like this patriarchal society that they live in, really kind of like gives some pushback, and it has really developed a lot of like culture, not only like within Jane Austen's writing, but like when people are watching fantasy shows and people like perceive it to be like some like male power fantasy thing. Now there's like a niche for women to see that and be like, wow, like I can be into fantasy too, and there's like a power fantasy in its own right for me through Sansa Stark and stuff like that. So
She's so sick.
I know.
She's so cool.
badass.
Love Sansa Stark.
All right, Audrey?
Incredible. Oh, yes,
out.
my next one is going to be Bridget Midler. And I am going to be comparing her to Barbie.
Oh.
She is the real life Barbie, and you cannot tell me otherwise. She is an actress. She is a singer. She has 2 doctorate degrees, a PhD and a JD. The PhD is a doctor of philosophy from MIT, and the JD is a doctor of law from Harvard Law. And she's also a CEO of a space company, Northwood Space, which attempts to mass produce ground stations to communicate with satellites. And she's also a mom. So, like, she's really doing it all.
She has a child?
She
didn't know
adopted a kid during quarantine.
Adopted a kid too. That's amazing in its own right.
She makes my LinkedIn look terrible.
Yeah, seriously. She made her resume is crazy.
Stacked.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was a perfect comparison, and thank you, Audrey, for that to close us out. That's all the time we have for tonight, unfortunately. Next time you're watching a movie or a show with a strong female character, make sure to tell the strong female characters in your life how great they are, women's history or not. We'll save a seat for you next time here at the desk. Back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Yaya. Our history panel always provides some needed levity to our program. Stay tuned, because next Yaya will take you on a journey to Brazil with another edition of ATD International. We'll be back. Lastly tonight, Yaya will take you to Brazil to discuss the ongoing situation surrounding former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who lost his 2022 re-election bid to current President Lula da Silva. Since his ouster, Bolsonaro supporters stormed Brazilian parliamentary buildings in a scene reminiscent of January 6, 2021 at the U.S. Capitol. And former President Bolsonaro has been charged with several crimes similar to former President Trump. I will send it back over to Yaya for all the details.
Thanks again, Sean. Welcome back to At the Desk International. I'm Yaya Wan, here to broaden your horizons and keep you informed on what's going on in this crazy world. Today, I'll be taking you to Brazil, where former President Jair Bolsonaro has landed in some hot water. Brazil's federal police launched an investigation on Monday to look into Bolsonaro's 2-day stay at the Hungarian embassy in Brasilia, the national capital. This investigation was launched amid rumors that the former president is attempting to evade arrest. You might be asking yourself, evade arrest? What did he do? In 2022, Jair Bolsonaro lost the presidential election to another former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, commonly referred to as Lula. The race was close, with Lula winning 48% to Bolsonaro's 43% in the first round, and eventually reaching 50% in the runoff election. That took place on October 30th, 2022. On January 8th, 2023, a week after Lula's inauguration, Bolsonaro supporters rioted in Brasilia to protest the loss. Wait a minute. Where have I heard this before? Prosecutors have been searching for connections between the far-right former president and these riots. The federal police have seized his Brazilian and Italian passports and searched the homes of Bolsonaro's top aides, who are suspected of, quote, acting in attempt to form a coup d'etat in February. Bolsonaro's visit to the Hungarian embassy took place just days after the fact. Earlier this month, two of Brazil's top military officials informed the police that Bolsonaro had presented them with a plan to remain in power after the election. Bolsonaro has denied any wrongdoing, with his lawyers stating that he was invited to stay at the embassy. I think it's fair to say that the parallels between Brazil and the U.S. are striking, to say the least. We are currently seeing a rise in right-wing populist leaders all around the world, especially after the rise of Trump. But will election denial also become a trend? For the sake of democracy, I hope not. That's all the time we have for At the Desk International. I'm Yaya Wan, and I'll see you at our next destination. Back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Yaya. Well, that is all the time we have for tonight. We really appreciate you tuning in. We would like to thank our entire behind-the-scenes crew for their hard work. We could not put this show on without them. We look forward to seeing you again next week. In the meantime, keep up with us on all of our socials and let us know what topics you may be interested in seeing us cover. Once again, for all of us here at the desk, I'm Sean Romeo. Have a good night.